Hello everyone, still in America, and today it's another Japanese car. An iconic vehicle, I think you'll all agree. For today I am driving a Mitsubishi Lancer Evo. This is quite significant. I have never ever driven a Lancer before, and I have before me an excellent road on which to test it. Now this is the final edition Lancer, and they really do mean that. They made no more after this. This is a 2015 model year, and I can't quite remember if we ever got these. I'm not sure that we did. I know that we got quite a few different run-out versions, including things up to the bonkers FQ440, but I can't ever remember seeing these on sale. Perhaps that's because when they were on sale, I wasn't really that interested in them. However, after falling in love with my Subaru Impreza and my Celica GT-Four, I'm now of the opinion that absolutely everybody should try an old school rally replica. But I want to see if the Evo deserves to be included in that holy trinity. Let's go. It genuinely doesn't take very long to get to the simple answer. Yes, it does. I've been driving a large variety of cars this week, from big American pickups to luxury Japanese coupes and everything in between. But this really feels properly old school, and in a good way. By the time this came out in 2015, it was a pretty old car. They originally debuted in about 2008, I believe, and I'm not convinced they actually changed an awful lot. It seems that Mitsubishi, much like their stablemates over at Subaru, once they left competitive rallying, seemed to, well, just lose a bit of interest in moving the game on for their road car. You might think that this car, being the final edition, has all sorts of bells and whistles thrown at it. Apparently not. It's got a plaque thrown at it. This is number 27 out of about 1,500 cars that were sold in the United States, and they were sold in other markets as well. I'm not sure what options you could actually choose, and I believe they may have all been this shade of white, which, let's face it, if you're going to have an Evo, I think it's got to be either white or red. But that's just me. It's not actually a bad looking car. I don't think it's my favourite Evo from a visual perspective. I think the earlier 5 and 6s are maybe the highlights for me, and actually the 8 is kind of growing on me too. What's interesting is that a few things do differ between Subaru and Evo, as you might expect, beyond the obvious, like the fact that this has a straight 4 versus Subaru's famous boxer 4. This has a 5-speed gearbox because it was the better Mitsubishi box. And they were also doing 6-speed twin clutch setups, but I've not driven one of those, and from what I hear, they're not that great, being a fairly early system. The reason they have a 5-speed in here is it was the stronger of the boxes available to them. In Subaru land, it's the other way around. Their 5-speed is made of glass and broken dreams, and the 6-speed is the good one. Sadly, my own Impreza had the 5-speed, and that's why it was on at least gearbox number 3 when I had it. This is geared very short indeed. It's pretty much Civic Type R gearing, so at a nice 70 mile an hour you're doing about 3,500 RPM on the tacho, which for long journeys may start to get on your wick. However, for this kind of tight twisty stuff, it is absolutely perfect. Heeling and towing doesn't come super naturally because the pedals are spaced a little bit further apart than I would like. And even at these modest speeds, I do have one major criticism of the car's interior, aside from the fact that it is a little bit cheap and there is a rattle in here somewhere. These seats, they're just not as supportive as you would expect them to be. It's a real shame and a bit of a blot on the copybook of a car that otherwise has an awful lot going for it. The steering in this thing is absolutely wonderful. It's not quite as good as that in my Celica, but it is vastly better than that in my Subaru, and leagues ahead of that in the Impreza hatchback that I drove recently, which is probably the fairest thing to compare this to. Now, it's pretty brisk. It's got a lot of turbo lag, as you'd expect of an old school 2-litre forced induction unit, but once it's on song, it does shift rather. There's no rush for the red line like you might get in a supercharged or naturally aspirated car, but of course that's to be expected. I'm told that the car will start to slow down at around the 150 mile an hour marker, although today I shan't be testing that. We are also at some altitude as well, so I expect that will be blunting the car's performance just a little bit. This is a fairly stock example. The only modifications that I know of are a couple of bits of decorative aero and a cold air induction kit. A nice little display down here tells me what the super all-wheel control system is doing, because this car can send the torque wherever it wants, front, back, side to side. And as you push on and put your foot down, it really does shuffle that torque around. It's a very good system. At sensible or entertaining road speeds, the car's front bias doesn't really work against it too much, and the car has got pretty decent brakes on it, which I certainly couldn't say for my old Impreza WRX. Does pull all the way to that 7,000 RPM red line, and just take a moment to see the stunning views over there. We have been blessed all the past couple of weeks with some amazing sights, and I hope you've been appreciating them. The car doesn't sound the most exciting with that standard exhaust, but you do get a few turbo whistles and whooshes thanks to that induction kit. You don't get an awful lot of texture through the steering wheel, but what you do have is just a beautiful weight. There's a very slight hesitation between input and steering response, which is probably my major criticism of the system. However, once you're in a corner, the car responds exactly as you'd want it to. This isn't a particularly light car, but in the context of what I've been driving this week, it feels like a real featherweight. Now, as a practical proposition, this car does have, well, a couple of shortcomings. If I'm honest, well, in this country it only has one. Back in the UK, thirst is an issue, but here, no one gives a shit. The biggest problem is the fact that the boot is actually pretty small, much smaller than I expected it to be. And coming from the Impreza, which had an absolutely cavernous rear storage space, it's a little bit of a disappointment. So if you're switching from one brand to the other, well, that would be something to consider. Granted, the interior doesn't feel the most high rent, but then you wouldn't expect it to in a car like this. Unfortunately, when these cars were sold, they were not cheap at all. The base price in the USA for one of these was about $38,000. I've seen a few that got optioned up to about $43,000. I don't know what you actually could option on one of these, and I feel like it's a bit odd that you can actually option anything on a car called a Final Edition. In my opinion, the Final Edition should have, well, everything thrown at it. It should be their celebration run-out special. We're going to give you the best thing that we possibly could. And so far as I can see, they didn't even bother giving it any more power. This is about 300 horsepower, just shy of 300 torque. Nothing particularly special. Why they didn't do more, I don't know. I suspect it might be something to do with emissions legislation in this country, maybe. Couldn't say for sure. However, if we set that all aside, as a car to come and enjoy a nice canyon road, this thing is mega. I love it. You get fired down the road, it stops really well, it digs into the tarmac nicely. With a bit of effort you can heel and tow it. You shoot round, the all-wheel drive system does its thing, doesn't feel intrusive. No, it's not as absolutely bonkers, nutter ballistic as a Nissan GT-R, but then a GT-R is an awful lot more money again. The clutch's biting point is quite high, which takes a little bit of getting used to, but you do eventually. This particular car also has some ludicrous tints on the windows, which I'm sure you can see, because it's bright out there. Well, it's not actually that bright, but look at that compared to that. So I hope this all looks okay for you guys in here. Yeah, I've got the world-famous shirt on again, because I know you guys love it so very much. It just feels right, this car. It's just a car that you get in and instantly enjoy. A car like this has got to get its priorities right. It's got to handle great and be a good base for you to make what you want out of it. That's the whole point. They are built to be modded and made into whatever it is that you want them to be, usually some sort of nutty kind of crazy thing. For me, I'd love to do a sort of Japanese-inspired kind of toge monster type thing, you know, not crazy power, but just make it super responsive, nice, handle well, that kind of thing. Also got a bit of soft spot for the old HKS rally cars, but that's probably thanks to Gran Turismo. I blame Gran Turismo for a lot of the problems in my adult life, I gotta say. But this is cool. And not only is this a cool car, this is another super cool lady-owned car that I've driven out here. So I want to say a big thanks to Ashley for lending it to me. This has been quite an enlightening experience. Unfortunately, back home, Evo 10s are still far too much money for me to consider buying one, and as a daily proposition, they are just a bit too thirsty. Out here, I'd have one in a heartbeat because fuel consumption suddenly goes out the window, and you'll notice that is a theme with a lot of my videos over the past couple of weeks. But I can't help but wonder, driving this, what it might be like after you've modded it. And hopefully we won't have to wait too long to find out. Please leave a comment below. What do you prefer? Evo? Impreza? Hit the like button if you haven't already. We'll see you for the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.